Imagine you're walking through the desert when you stumble upon a chest overflowing with gold coins. Your first thought? I'm rich. But what if I told you that finding this treasure could be the worst thing that ever happened to you? What if, instead of prosperity, it brought poverty, corruption, and even war? This isn't just a thought experiment. It's the reality for dozens of nations around the world. Countries blessed with vast oil reserves, glittering diamonds, and precious minerals often end up poorer, more corrupt, and more unstable than their resource-poor neighbors. Economists call this paradox the resource curse, and its effects are so counterintuitive, so devastating, that understanding it will completely change how you see global economics. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Venezuela, sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, has citizens searching through garbage for food, while resource-poor Singapore became one of the world's wealthiest nations. The answer lies in mechanisms so subtle, yet so powerful, that they've shaped the fate of entire civilizations. Let's start with a question that seems to have an obvious answer. If you had to choose between being born in a country with massive oil deposits or one with nothing but rocky soil, which would you pick? Most people would choose oil without hesitation. More resources should equal more wealth, right? It's basic economics, or so it seems. Venezuela possesses approximately 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the largest in the world. Nigeria pumps out 2 million barrels daily. The DRC holds an estimated $24 trillion worth of untapped mineral deposits, including cobalt, copper, and diamonds. These nations should be economic powerhouses, their citizens living in prosperity. Instead, Venezuela's economy has contracted by over 75% since 2013, triggering the largest refugee crisis in Latin American history. Nigeria, despite earning over $600 billion from oil since the 1970s, has 70% of its population living below the poverty line. The DRC, with its unimaginable mineral wealth, ranks among the poorest countries on Earth, with a GDP per capita of just $580. Meanwhile, consider Japan, a mountainous island nation with virtually no natural resources, forced to import 84% of its energy needs. Or South Korea, equally resource-poor, devastated by war in the 1950s. Or Switzerland, a landlocked country of rocks and lakes. All three are among the world's wealthiest nations, with highly developed economies, advanced technology sectors, and prosperous populations. This isn't coincidence, it's a pattern so consistent that in 1995, economist Jeffrey Sachs gave it a name, the resource curse. His research revealed a shocking statistical relationship. Countries with high natural resource exports in 1970 experienced significantly slower economic growth over the following 2 decades compared to resource-poor nations. How is this possible? What invisible mechanism transforms blessing into curse, wealth into poverty? The first piece of this puzzle was discovered in the Netherlands during the 1960s, and it happened so suddenly that economists initially thought they were witnessing an anomaly. In 1959, the Dutch discovered enormous natural gas fields in the North Sea. The government celebrated. Investors poured in. The energy sector exploded with activity, creating thousands of jobs. Tax revenues soared. Everything seemed perfect for about 5 years. Then something strange started happening. Dutch manufacturing companies began shutting down. Factories that had operated successfully for decades suddenly couldn't compete. Workers lost jobs in droves. The country's traditional industries, textiles, electronics, machinery, withered despite the booming economy overall. The Netherlands was getting richer while simultaneously becoming poorer. Economists scrambled to understand what was happening, and what they discovered became one of the most important concepts in development economics: Dutch disease. Here's the mechanism, and it's devastatingly simple. When natural gas exports surged, foreign buyers needed Dutch currency to purchase it. This massive demand caused the Dutch guilder to appreciate dramatically. A stronger currency meant that every other Dutch export became more expensive for foreign buyers. A Dutch-made machine that cost $10,000 before the gas boom might now cost $15,000, while a German competitor's identical machine remained at $10,000. Manufacturing companies faced an impossible choice: lower prices and accept losses, or maintain prices and lose customers. Either way, they couldn't compete. Meanwhile, the gas sector employed relatively few workers. It's a capital-intensive industry, not a labor-intensive one. The result? The Netherlands lost diverse, job-creating industries in exchange for a single sector that employed far fewer people. But Dutch disease is just the appetizer. The real devastation comes from how the resource curse destroys institutions, corrupts governments, and tears apart the social fabric of entire nations. Imagine you're the leader of a small, poor country. Your government budget is $50 million per year, scraped together from taxing your citizens' small businesses, agricultural sales, and modest incomes. To keep your position, you need to deliver roads, schools, hospitals, and economic growth. Your citizens watch your performance closely because they're literally paying for it with their taxes. Now imagine geologists discover oil beneath your territory. Within months, foreign companies are offering you $500 million per year for drilling rights, 10 times your entire national budget. Suddenly, you don't need taxes from citizens. You don't need to build a diverse economy. You just need to control the oil. This scenario isn't hypothetical. It's the reality in dozens of countries, and it fundamentally changes the relationship between governments and citizens in ways that destroy democratic accountability. Political scientist Michael Ross studied this phenomenon extensively and found that oil wealth dramatically increases the likelihood of authoritarian rule. The mechanism is straightforward. Governments funded by natural resources don't depend on citizen productivity, so they don't need to keep citizens happy, educated, or economically empowered. They just need to control the resource. Consider Equatorial Guinea, a small African nation that discovered oil in 1996. President Teodoro Obiang, who seized power in a coup, has ruled for over 40 years. Despite oil revenues exceeding $3 billion annually for a population of just 1.4 million people, which should make every citizen wealthy, over 70% live in poverty. Meanwhile, Obiang's son posted Instagram photos showing his collection of luxury cars worth over $100 million. The oil money flows directly from the ground to the ruling elite, bypassing the population entirely. This pattern repeats across the globe. In resource-rich countries, governments spend an average of 45% less on education compared to resource-poor nations. They invest less in healthcare, infrastructure, and economic diversification. Why? Because the money keeps flowing regardless of these investments. But the corruption runs even deeper than you might imagine, infiltrating every level of society in ways that become self-perpetuating. Here's where things get truly insidious. When massive resource wealth concentrates in government hands, the most rational career path for ambitious, talented people changes fundamentally. In a diverse economy like South Korea or Taiwan, intelligent, hardworking individuals become entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, or doctors. They create value. They bake new economic pies. Their path to wealth involves innovation, productivity, and meeting market needs. In a resource-cursed economy, the fastest path to wealth is securing a position that gives you access to resource revenues. Economists call this rent-seeking, fighting over who gets to slice the existing pie rather than baking new ones. Nigeria provides a perfect case study. During the oil boom of the 1970s, the government controlled oil revenues exceeding $400 billion over 3 decades. The most lucrative career path became obtaining government contracts, securing positions in the state oil company, or gaining political influence to redirect oil money. Talented Nigerians who might have become tech innovators or manufacturing entrepreneurs instead focused their energy on accessing government oil revenues. The economist Paul Collier documented that in resource-rich countries, the brightest university graduates disproportionately pursue government careers or positions in resource extraction, while in resource-poor countries, they pursue entrepreneurship and private sector innovation at much higher rates. The entire talent pool of a nation redirects towards redistributing existing wealth rather than creating new wealth. This vicious cycle creates a vicious circle. As more talent flows toward rent-seeking, fewer people engage in productive entrepreneurship. As entrepreneurship declines, the economy becomes even more dependent on resources. As resource dependence increases, rent-seeking becomes even more attractive. The country spirals downward while sitting on trillions in natural wealth. Venezuela's trajectory illustrates this perfectly. In the 1950s, before oil dominated the economy, Venezuela had growing manufacturing sector, agricultural exports, and diverse economic activity. Talented Venezuelans built businesses across various industries. But as oil revenues exploded in the 1970s, manufacturing investment plummeted by 60%. Why build a factory when you could secure an oil contract? By 2000, non-oil exports had virtually disappeared. When oil prices collapsed in 2014, Venezuela had no economic foundation to fall back on. The talent and institutions needed for a diverse economy had withered away decades earlier.
Resource prices don't move like prices for manufactured goods. They swing wildly, creating economic chaos that makes long-term planning nearly impossible. Between 2004 and 2008, oil prices surged from $30 per barrel to $147. Resource-rich countries celebrated, ramping up government spending on ambitious projects. Venezuela's government spending increased by 170% during this period. Angola launched massive infrastructure programs. Nigeria expanded public sector employment dramatically. Then came 2009. Oil prices crashed to $40 per barrel. And here's the critical problem. Government spending is easy to increase, but politically almost impossible to decrease. Those infrastructure projects, half finished. Those government jobs, impossible to eliminate without riots. Those social programs, citizens now depend on them. Countries faced brutal choices: slash spending and trigger social unrest, or borrow money to maintain programs. Most chose borrowing, accumulating massive debts during boom times that became unsustainable during busts. This volatility fundamentally undermines economic development. Businesses can't plan investments when they don't know whether the economy will boom or bust next year. Foreign investors demand higher returns to compensate for instability. Education and healthcare programs launch during booms, then collapse during busts, leaving populations worse off than if the programs had never existed. Compare this to manufactured exports. The price of semiconductors, automobiles, or machinery shows far greater stability because it's tied to production costs and steady global demand rather than speculation and geopolitical disruptions. Countries exporting manufactured goods experience economic cycles, but nothing like the violent swings that resource exporters endure. In 1975, Venezuelan oil minister Juan Pablo Perez Alfonso called petroleum the devil's excrement. He had witnessed firsthand how oil wealth was tearing his country apart.
but his words proved prophetic across the globe. Natural resources create a terrible incentive. Whoever controls the oil wells, diamond mines, or mineral deposits controls enormous wealth without needing to build businesses, educate populations, or create value. This makes violent seizure of resource infrastructure economically rational in ways that seizing a factory or software company never is. Political scientist Michael Ross found that oil-producing countries are 50% more likely to experience civil war than non-oil countries. The pattern appears across continents. Nigeria's Delta region has experienced decades of armed conflict over oil revenues. Angola's 27-year civil war was largely funded by diamond and oil wealth, with competing factions fighting for control of resource deposits. The Democratic Republic of Congo has suffered continuous conflict since the 1990s, with armed groups fighting over cobalt, coltan, and copper mines. These aren't ancient ethnic conflicts coincidentally occurring in resource-rich areas. The resources themselves fund and perpetuate the fighting. Armed groups can sustain themselves indefinitely by controlling a single mine or oil field, creating a vicious cycle where violence prevents development and resource wealth funds continued violence. Sierra Leone's civil war illustrates this mechanism perfectly. The Revolutionary United Front sustained an 11-year brutal conflict primarily through control of diamond mines. They didn't need popular support, tax revenues, or economic productivity, just control of diamond deposits. The war killed over 50,000 people and displaced 2 million in a country of just 6 million. When the conflict finally ended, Sierra Leone ranked as the poorest country on Earth, despite billions in diamond wealth extracted during the war. Something subtle but devastating happens in resource-rich economies that economists didn't fully understand until recent decades. Innovation collapses. When South Korea's economy struggled in the 1960s, the government couldn't simply extract oil to fund development. Korean entrepreneurs had no choice but to innovate, to figure out how to compete globally despite having no natural advantages. This pressure created Samsung, Hyundai, and LG. It forced development of advanced manufacturing techniques, investment in education, and cultivation of engineering talent. Compare this to Saudi Arabia. Despite over $2 trillion in oil revenues since 1970, Saudi Arabia has produced virtually no globally competitive companies outside the energy sector. The country ranks 68th globally in patent applications per capita, behind resource-poor nations like Israel, ranked first, South Korea second, and Taiwan fourth. The pattern repeats worldwide. Resource-poor countries like Switzerland, Japan, and Singapore dominate global innovation rankings. Resource-rich countries like Russia, Venezuela, and Nigeria rank far below their income levels would predict. Why? Because innovation requires failure, experimentation, and risk-taking, things that don't happen when easy resource money is available. Venture capital investments in resource-rich countries are a fraction of those in resource-poor nations. Tech startups barely exist. Research and development spending remains minimal. Economist Ricardo Hausmann developed the concept of economic complexity, basically how sophisticated a country's economic activities are. His research shows that resource-rich countries consistently develop less complex economies, remaining trapped in simple extraction, while resource-poor countries climb the complexity ladder into advanced manufacturing, technology, and services. Singapore's transformation captures this perfectly. In 1965, Singapore became independent with no resources, no oil, and limited fresh water. The government had no choice but to build competitive advantages through education, rule of law, and innovation. Today, Singapore's GDP per capita exceeds $65,000, higher than Saudi Arabia's, despite having zero oil. Singapore created wealth. Saudi Arabia merely extracted it. We need to talk about something that doesn't sound exciting, but is absolutely critical: institutional quality. Strong institutions, independent courts, transparent regulations, effective bureaucracies, property rights protection form the foundation of long-term prosperity, and resource wealth systematically destroys them. When governments don't need tax revenue from citizens, they don't need effective institutions. Think about it. Why build a competent tax collection system when oil revenues dwarf anything taxation could generate? Why develop transparent procurement processes when resource contracts can be negotiated behind closed doors? Why invest in independent courts when resource wealth lets you buy loyalty? The data is stark. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index consistently shows resource-rich countries ranking among the most corrupt. Of the 20 most oil-dependent economies, 18 score in the bottom half for corruption. Meanwhile, resource-poor countries like Denmark, New Zealand, and Singapore consistently rank among the least corrupt. Botswana provides a fascinating exception that proves the rule. Despite massive diamond wealth, Botswana built strong institutions, maintained democratic governance, and achieved sustained economic growth. How? The country discovered diamonds after independence, and its first president, Seretse Khama, deliberately used resource revenues to build institutions rather than personal wealth. He established transparent management of diamond revenues, invested in education, and created systems that outlasted his presidency. But Botswana is the exception. For every Botswana, there are 10 Angolas, Venezuelas, or Nigerias where resource wealth funded institutional decay rather than development. Here's something that should shock you. Oil-rich countries systematically underinvest in education compared to resource-poor nations, and the consequences ripple through generations. When the World Bank analyzed education spending across countries, they found that resource-dependent nations spend approximately 20% less on education as a percentage of GDP compared to resource-poor nations. This isn't because they lack money. Many have enormous resource revenues. It's because governments funded by resources rather than citizen productivity don't need educated populations.
An educated population demands accountability, transparency, and opportunity. They question corruption, organize politically, and challenge incompetent leadership. For authoritarian regimes sustained by resource wealth, an educated population is a threat, not an asset. The Gulf states illustrate this paradoxically. Despite massive wealth, countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE import virtually all skilled labor, engineers, doctors, scientists, managers, from abroad. Their education systems produce relatively few graduates capable of competing globally. Why? Because developing human capital requires long-term investment in systems that empower citizens, something resource-funded autocracies resist. Contrast this with Vietnam or Taiwan, where limited resources forced massive education investment. Vietnam spends 5.7% of GDP on education, despite being much poorer than oil-rich nations. The result? Vietnam now produces more university graduates annually than several Gulf states combined and has become a manufacturing powerhouse. This education gap compounds over time. As resource-poor countries build human capital, they develop competitive advantages in innovation and productivity.
As resource-rich countries neglect education, they remain dependent on extraction, unable to diversify even when they want to. By now, you might be thinking, okay, if resource wealth causes these problems, why don't countries just diversify their economies? Excellent question. Many have tried. Most have failed spectacularly. Russia has announced diversification plans repeatedly since the 1990s. Despite hundreds of billions in oil revenues, non-oil sectors have actually shrunk as a percentage of the economy. Nigeria has launched multiple economic diversification initiatives over 40 years. Manufacturing share of GDP has declined from 15% in 1980 to 9% today. Why is diversification so difficult? Because the resource curse creates structural barriers that become self-reinforcing. First, there's the currency problem we discussed earlier. Dutch disease makes manufacturing uncompetitive. Second, resource revenues create high wages in the extraction sector, making it difficult for other industries to attract workers. Third, the focus on rent-seeking means limited entrepreneurial talent enters productive sectors. Fourth, weak institutions make it difficult for non-resource businesses to operate efficiently. But the deepest problem is political. Diversification requires long-term investments that might not pay off for decades. Building education systems, developing infrastructure for manufacturing, creating business-friendly regulations. Resource-funded governments operate on shorter timeframes, focused on maintaining power and distributing resource rents to key supporters. Investing in education or institution building doesn't provide the immediate political benefits that distributing oil money does. Kazakhstan's experience is instructive. Since independence in 1991, the government has repeatedly announced ambitious diversification plans, investing billions in manufacturing, agriculture, and technology. Yet oil and gas still account for 60% of exports 30 decades later. The structural forces pulling the economy toward resource dependence proved stronger than policy intentions. Not every resource-rich country falls into the curse, and studying these exceptions reveals exactly what's required to escape it. Norway discovered massive North Sea oil in the 1960s, but avoided the curse through deliberate, disciplined policies that other nations found impossible to replicate. The Norwegian government created a sovereign wealth fund, depositing oil revenues rather than spending them domestically. Today, this fund holds over $1.4 trillion, more than $250,000 per Norwegian citizen, invested globally to avoid currency appreciation and Dutch disease. Critically, Norway already had strong institutions before discovering oil. Independent courts, transparent government, educated population, and democratic traditions were established. The oil wealth came to a country already committed to institutional quality, making it much easier to manage wisely. Chile provides another fascinating example with copper. Despite copper representing 50% of exports, Chile built strong macroeconomic institutions, invested heavily in education, and maintained fiscal discipline. The country established a copper stabilization fund, saving during price booms and spending during busts to smooth volatility. Chile's GDP per capita has grown consistently, reaching $15,000, making it one of the Latin America's wealthiest nations. But notice the pattern. Norway and Chile succeeded because they had strong institutions before resource wealth arrived, or deliberately built them despite resource revenues. For countries that discover resources amid weak institutions, the curse becomes nearly impossible to escape because resource wealth itself undermines the institutions needed to manage it. The resource curse isn't just historical, it's shaping global economics right now and will determine the fate of nations in coming decades. Guyana recently discovered oil reserves estimated at 11 billion barrels. With a population of just 800,000, this should make every Guyanese person wealthy. But economists are already warning that the country faces severe resource curse risks, weak institutions, limited economic complexity, and political vulnerabilities that could turn blessing into curse. Meanwhile, the green energy transition is creating new resource dependencies. Lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements required for batteries and solar panels are highly concentrated geographically. The Democratic Republic of Congo controls 70% of global cobalt production. China dominates rare earth processing. These countries face the same resource curse mechanisms that plagued oil producers, unless they learn from history. What should we learn from all this? That wealth isn't about what you have beneath the ground, it's about what you build above it. Institutions, education, innovation, and economic complexity matter far more than natural resources. Singapore has no oil, but built prosperity through institutions and human capital. Switzerland has no diamonds, but became wealthy through innovation and stability. Japan imports 84% of its energy, but created a $5 trillion economy through manufacturing excellence and technological advancement. Meanwhile, Venezuela sits on the world's largest oil reserves, while citizens flee by the millions. The DRC possesses trillions in minerals, while ranking among the poorest nations. Russia has enormous energy wealth, but an economy smaller than Italy's, despite having twice the population. The lesson is clear and profound. Resources are not destiny. What matters is what countries do with resources, and more importantly, what they build regardless of resources.
Now you understand why that chest of gold coins in the desert might be a curse rather than a blessing. You've seen how oil wealth corrupted Venezuela, how diamond riches fueled Sierra Leone's civil war, how massive mineral deposits left the DRC impoverished. You've witnessed how Dutch disease destroyed manufacturing, how rent-seeking poisoned entire economies, how resource wealth systematically undermines the very institutions countries need to prosper. But you've also seen the exceptions: Norway's discipline, Chile's institutions, Botswana's leadership, proving that the curse isn't inevitable for those willing to make hard choices. This knowledge changes how you see global economics, development, and wealth. The next time you hear about a country discovering oil or massive mineral deposits, you'll understand why economists worry rather than celebrate. You'll recognize the structural forces that will pull that nation toward corruption, conflict, and stagnation unless extraordinary leadership and institutions prevent it. And here's what makes this truly relevant to you. These same mechanisms operate at every scale. Easy money, whether from resources, inheritance, or windfalls, creates the same temptations and challenges for individuals as for nations. The question is always, will you build productive capabilities or simply consume what you have? If this deep dive into economic paradoxes expanded your understanding of how the world really works, hit that subscribe button. More importantly, drop a comment telling me what surprised you most about the resource curse. Did you know about Dutch disease before this? Can you think of other examples where abundance created scarcity? And here's your challenge. Share this video with someone who thinks natural resources automatically create wealth. Let's spread understanding of why institutions, education, and innovation matter more than what's buried underground. Remember, in economics as in life, it's not what you're given that determines success, it's what you build with it.